I'd like to tell you a little bit about Indian legends or Indian stories. These stories were handed down from generation to generation, like people write books and dictionaries or something, but the Indian way was telling stories, and it was mostly directed at children.
We have stories of legends and myths that we pass on to our young people. And one of the famous or favorite stories is Wormface. And this story has been passed down from my great-grandmother to my grandmother to my mother to me, and I've told my daughter and her daughter, which is my granddaughter. So a lot of stories are generational. They're passed down. And most of them have like a moral to it.
Probably going to talk about the story Wormface. That's one of our family stories that we tell to our young as a lesson. It has a lot of lessons in it. We also tell many other stories to each other. We don't just sit around and tell each other Wormface, but it helps us see a lot of things in different aspects. May not be word for word from the way my grandma's or my mom has told me, but it's the same meaning in it. I know how to dress it up for my daughter. She'll dress it up for whoever she's going to tell it to. My mom will dress it up for me, and so on and so on. So that's how oral story and tradition changes things, but yet sometimes the core and the heart of the story is still there.
I have to tell you the story of Wormface. It's about this girl. She likes to make fun of people. She's at the age that she could be married. And she can't seem to figure out what person to marry because she always finds something bad about them and stuff.
So a lot of the young men came to call on her, young men of along the Columbia River or around here in this area. And she'd look at them, and her father would present her to them, and she'd look at them and she'd say, "Oh no, he's got a funny nose," or "He doesn't talk right," or she'd find something wrong that wasn't. She just turned her nose up at them. She didn't want nothing to do with them. So her father was unhappy, but he let it go. And one day a stranger walked into the village. He was a very handsome stranger. He had long braids and pretty beautiful finery, long robes, real beautiful, articulate made finery.
And she was very taken by his looks. He was very handsome, so she decided to marry him. And so they had the wedding there, and then he said that she had to go with him to where his mother lives, to their home.
So as they travel, it was going to take days to travel. So, here he is, handsome, tall, and she's honored to be his bride, going to meet his mom, and she hopes that she does right, all the things a new wife would think about. And they traveled, but he was kind of mean, kind of rough, gruff sounding, to her, rude. And finally they camped one more night. He goes, tomorrow night we'll be able to see my mom. She lives in like a swampy area, but she's a very old woman, and she can't wait to meet you.
She just said okay. So they went, and then one time when her husband went hunting, she heard like little voices and stuff. And she looked down and then she saw a bunch of little ants. And then they said something's wrong with this guy.
So they journeyed on. She packed her stuff and they journeyed on. And I think it was about the third day she woke up. She knew something was wrong. She woke up and she turned and looked at her sleeping husband. And what do you think she saw? She saw a horrible sight. Just maggots crawling out of his nose and his ears and his mouth. He looked awful. I can only imagine. And she held herself back. She wondered what was wrong. And he woke up, the monster Wormface woke up, and he started laughing at her. He said, "Why are you so afraid? I'm the man that you wanted. I'm the man that you married. I was handsome. Isn't that what you wanted? That's the way I made myself look. But actually, I'm a monster from back east, and I'm taking you to my mother, who's also a monster. She's a big monster that lives in a big lake back east, and she likes to eat conceited girls like you."
And so she just sat there and she cried. And he told her to go to bed, and he goes, "Do I look so handsome to you now? Do you care for me now?" He goes, "My mother loves young ladies that think so much of themselves. And she's going to really love you." And so she tried to sleep, and she pretended she was asleep, and she was hoping that the ants would come, and they did. And they asked her if she was wanting to be saved, and she said yes. And so they start telling her she needs to make new moccasins. And being like a spoiled young girl, she wondered, why do they want to have me make moccasins? They understand I'm gonna, meet this monster. And they told her, just make your moccasins. We will tell you how to make them. And so she did. And so the next morning they got up and they were headed towards the lake.
This man's not saying who he is. You need to make moccasins. And at the very back of your moccasin, like these is where you put your feet, your toes, the back on the heel. You put a little tab there. She didn't understand, but she wasn't going to question these wise beings because they go with way deep in the earth. And they some of those ants can live a long time. So she goes, okay. And that's what she did.
They told her to sew it on and stuff, so she did. They'd help her. She sewed them on. And then they finally arrived at where supposedly he said his mom would be. And so she waited. She's like, where? She's looking around for the house or whatever, the teepee. She couldn't see one. She's like, where does your mom live? And he says in the swamp, the lake or whatever it is. And then he took off his fake face, and then there's a bunch of worms, a bunch of bugs.
Finally, they were just about close to the place where the monster mother lived in this big lake. And she told her monster husband, "Oh, I got to rest. I'm so tired. I can't walk anymore." What she wanted to do was have time to put these moccasins on. So he said, "Okay, we're just about there at my mother's now. You can go ahead and rest." So she put these moccasins on and tied them on real good and tight. And finally they reached this area, and it was a big lake, and it was deep and it was dark. It looked spooky. To her it looked really scary, and she didn't even want to look. It looked so deep and mysterious. So he called out to his mother, said, "Mother, I brought another conceited girl for you to eat." So the girl was standing there, and next thing the lake started to churn and it started to boil, and this monster came out. She had big red eyes and big flared nostrils and great big sharp teeth. She started opening her mouth and she commanded her son, "Throw that girl in. I want to eat her now. I've been hungry." So all right. So he set this girl on the edge of the lake, and she looked around. She thought, "Oh, I hope the ants have kept their word. I've kept their word. I've kept my word. I made these moccasins with the little heels on them. I hope they've kept their promises. I hope they know I'm sincere." So she looked down, and sure enough, there were the ants down on her feet, and they were all riding on that heel, the one that special heel that she made. They're all riding on that. So the Wormface, he grabbed her by her shoulder and he tried to push her in. He couldn't budge her. She couldn't even move her. With all his might, he couldn't push her.
They told her, the ants told her, the second time he'd try it, that she was to bend down just before he gets there and pretend like she's almost going to fall in the lake. And so she said she would. And so when he ran up behind her with all his might and he was going to push her in, she bent down just before he got to her. And he went tumbling over her, and she was almost hanging into the lake herself. But something was holding her back. And then she was able to step back, and here it was the ants that were holding her back by the back of her moccasins.
So that when he pushed her, he would slip and fall into his mother's mouth. And of course, she ate him. Her eyes were closed when her mouth was open. She didn't know she was eating him. And when she found out, she died. But this young girl was really happy that, well, she wasn't eaten or hurt, but she learned something. Someone looks handsome. Someone may be in high standards, and always know that there is to be caution. Get to know them. And that's something she kept in her mind. And she taught her daughters, with whoever she married after that. She taught her family to always keep their, because she was the lucky one that didn't die from, falling in love with an image of a person and not the person. So with that lesson, it kind of makes you think. Sometimes they may be beautiful, they may have all that, but they may not be who they say they are.
And she got away with her life, and she found her way back home to her father and to her village. And she told her father and the other village people what happened to her. She almost died, all because of being a conceited person and making fun of people and their defects. And she promised herself she would never be like that again. So she eventually married a nice young man. He wasn't handsome or anything, but he was good and kind-hearted and considerate, provided well for her. And when she got married, the whole people joined in, and all the little creatures joined in, because they were happy that she came back alive, and they sang and danced and gave away in marriage to this nice young man. And she lived happily ever after. She had children, and she told this story to her children and to all the other children of the village about how being conceited is not a good thing, that it's a sin to make fun of other people. You should never think that way. You should treat others all the same way, with the same kind of heart. She taught that to her children, and her children taught it to their children, and now I'm teaching it to my children.
I just hope that the generations to come will continue to tell stories, and to tell stories like when they go to the mountains, or when they go into a powwow, or even just to the library or wherever. Someplace where there's people that will sit and listen and learn. And that's how people try to live every day, is by learning by things, either told to them by story, or they learn by experience, or they learn by listening.